Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra Pasternak-Jackson. I'm a dual citizen of the US and Finland, and I grew up living in several different countries all around Europe. So it's a great pleasure to be here today and talk a little bit about communication style differences.
We are so happy to have you here. And our next speaker, Kaija Pohjala from Kaiku. Kaija, please introduce yourself as well.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kaija Pohjala from Kaiku. I'm currently working as a leadership coach and a change management coach consultant. And I've trained a lot of people also in the international setting during my career, over 20 years. And I help them to give their best potential out in challenging situations. Like the presenting on stage is actually a very challenging for many of us.
Thank you, Kaija. Your career is really impressive and I'm happy to learn from you today. Actually, now we can let go of our presentation. Thank you, Kaija. And to start, I would like to say a few words about our subject today. So we'll be discussing improving our presentation skills and finding out what we can learn from great American speakers. And we'll get many insights from Alexandra and Kaija. And I know that this is a topic that can really push us out of our comfort zone. And actually, when we were preparing for this webinar with Alexandra and Kaija, we talked about how normal it is to feel nervous or uncertain when you are speaking in public. But actually embracing that discomfort is really the key to growth. And I like to share something personal right now because I'm stepping out of my comfort zone right now because I haven't done public speaking in English for ages. I used to work in English a lot, but I haven't done it for some time. And actually, this is the first time ever I'm hosting this webinar in English. And here I am alongside these two great speakers that I really admire. So you can imagine it's really scary for me right now. But still, it's scary, but still I enjoy doing it. And I'm sure that by overcoming myself today, I will learn a lot. So I'm curious about you. When was the last time when you stepped out of your comfort zone? So maybe you can share some experiences in the chat and we can discuss them later. So please go and share your stories. And let's dive in our questions. First question is for Alexandra. So how can we step out of our comfort zones to become better communicators? How do you encourage your coworkers, for example?
Well, thank you so much for being here and well done to you. As we were discussing earlier, I'm extremely proud and thrilled that you're willing to step out of your comfort zone. And I think I completely agree that it's so key to embrace discomfort as a sign of growth. I think sometimes you feel an emotion and you're a little scared of it, you want to push it away, but really discomfort is a sign of growth. And by remembering that, it's a lot easier to move forward. On my team, we talk a lot about progress, not perfection. And we also talk a lot about the fact that the first time you do anything, it's always going to be hard. And the only way to make something feel easy is to do it many, many times. And things that help within that are iterative feedback. So I believe in continuous feedback. We'll even debrief some of my bigger presentations to discuss what went well, where I could improve. And when my team sees me taking that process seriously and knowing that I still get very nervous before each time I'm going to speak, or each time we have a big project we need to deliver, then that really helps them open up about their discomfort as well. And when you acknowledge something, you make it smaller. So I think you are setting a great example for all of us, Sala.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexandra. So Kaija, what would you like to add? You are an experienced comms trainer and also a business coach. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, if I take it from the beginning, when you think about going out to present, to give a public speech for a big audience, I think it's good to memorize that the audience is on your side. They are not your enemies. They want you to succeed. And look for that, have that approach in your mind. And I think also one good point is that please have some friends in the audience that you are talking to, some people who are smiling at you. That makes you ease up. And then you realize that it's not so bad at all. And usually when I train people, they are more capable, they are more creative, they have the power more than they ever thought they'd be. And with a little push and with a little support, like Alexandra said, you're supporting your team, miracles are happening every day.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important to what you just said about the audience, that you understand that most people, they really want us to succeed. And actually, right, just a while ago when I talked about my scary situation, I noticed that a bunch of you were sending like reaction, like hearts and thumbs. And that really like made me feel good that I know that there are people on the other side who want me to succeed, not to fail. So that's powerful. Even though I can't see your smiling faces right now, I know that you are still there. And that's
you can
nice.
see us, Salla.
Yeah. I can see your beautiful smile.
We are on your side.
That's great. So, but let's dive into the subject of what we could learn from American speakers. This is like really interesting when we were prepping for this webinar, because Alexandra told us such like thoughts that I hadn't really been thinking about before. So what are the key differences between Finnish and American communication styles?
Well, if I go ahead and start, we started this webinar talking about smiling. And, I smile as sort of a sense of neutral communication, because it shows others that I'm not a threat. I'm really interested in what you're saying. And in the US, you will see that people will speak with a slight smile on their face much more. And when Finns go to the US, I really recommend practicing that because you want to be able to approach people with enthusiasm and curiosity and interest to engage in conversation. And in Finland, it's far more common to have a very, very neutral expression. It's not considered a negative thing whatsoever to just kind of keep your facial expressions blank. But a core part of American communication is your ability to create various expressions on your face. And part of that is because American communication style is very audience focused. And I don't just mean in terms of standing on a stage and addressing a big audience. Even if you're on a one-on-one meeting, it's very much, the priority is how do I make the person I'm speaking with comfortable from the start? How do I connect with them as fast as possible? And so American speakers will often use hand gestures, voice modulation, your voice goes up and down, storytelling, sharing something a little bit more personal to connect with a one-on-one meeting, but also a bigger audience. And I might be getting ahead of myself, but I do almost every time I talk about communication, small talk comes up, and why small talk is so important for Americans, and why there are plenty of, books written about teaching Finns to do small talk in other European countries. But it plays such an important role in building rapport before you dive into the main content. Because in America, it's a melting pot, 365 million people, tons of different religions, nationalities, ethnic backgrounds, life situations. And often you don't know what that other person's worldview necessarily is. And so by starting with small talk, talking about sports, weather, vacation plans, you're immediately finding common ground and warming up the audience or the person you're speaking with for something a little bit more meaningful. And you'll see that also on stage as well, that really good American speakers will often start softly, more of a joking tone, warming up their audience to really make that core connection. But that's not something obviously you find naturally in Finnish culture is this culture of small talk, but I wanted to open that up as it's a bonding mechanism for Americans. And that's why it's so incredibly important.
Thank you. So it's really about making a connection, right?
Yes, and making your audience feel comfortable with you, and then you relax into your communication partner or your audience.
Thank you. By the way, I have a comment from our audience. Kaisa says that the smile is contagious, and she finds herself smiling there as she watches you, Alexandra.
Thank you.
That's a nice feedback.
Absolutely appreciate that.
Yeah. So Kaija, what kind of differences have you noticed, because you have spent time in the US as well?
Well, I can totally agree on what Alexandra was saying. I think it's exactly the same. And I was thinking when you were talking about smiling and small talk, it's like smile talk. We should learn about smile talk because that's the connection. It happens through smiling, through taking the other one into account. And maybe in Finland and the Eastern cultures are more conservative with their facial expressions. I think we could learn from that in order to make a real impact and influence for the people, and especially if we are doing business in the Western world. It's not only Americans, it's like the Western culture, I would say. The other thing actually that came to my mind is the pace. The pace of Finns are really slow, and even the tolerance of silence is kind of huge. And if you speak with Americans and you're silent, they think you're crazy, or you slept, or something happened.
No, they think you're uninterested in what they have to say.
Exactly. And again, if you're doing business or if you're doing anything, if you're handling negotiations, you should be aware as a Finn that you should be kind of watch out your pace, to put it more faster way, because that helps the situation, and the results are better. Or what do you think, Alexandra?
I was gonna say, yes, I think there's listening in either culture. We're communicating, but the art of communication is being understood, and listening is very different in both countries. So in Finland, if you have an expert speaking, you will wait for that expert to be completely done, and then for a moment or two of silence before you even start thinking about questioning that expert. But in the US, a sign of really being interested in something is very active listening. So sometimes that'll be perceived as interruption, but it's not actually true interruption, because they actually do wait for the end of the sentence, but they just don't wait for the beat behind the end of the sentence to start going, hey, I agree with that, or I have something to add to that, or this is my experience with that. And also in conversation, but also when you're addressing an audience, the way to show interest and respect is through questions. So questions have an incredibly important listening role. You do listen also to the end of the question. To the answer to the question. But it has a very important role in engaging with each other. I also, now we're talking very tactical, how you communicate, our communication styles. But what I also think is really interesting is Finns, when they give presentations or when you're in a meeting with them, will focus at the very beginning very often directly on the content rather than the delivery of what they're trying to say. So the content could be extremely excellent, but if the delivery is towards an American audience more reserved or more monotone, then it almost seems to an American audience that you're not interested in what you're talking about. And if you aren't interested and excited about what you're talking about, there's no way an American audience will be. And it's interesting because I've listened to quite a lot of pitches as well. And in Finland, there's a tendency to start with context, a lot of context, and then gradually build towards the main point. And, everything is logical, easy to understand, and you build towards this main point. And in pitching situations, sometimes by the time you get to that point, American audiences will have lost interest, because in the US, it's flipped. So In the US, you give your value proposition first. You give what is it that you're trying to say first. And then after that, you rely on those questions to fill in the context. And you know, we could do an entire hour just on what that is. But I think the order of the content really does matter when you're doing business transatlantically.
Wow, a lot of interesting things. And I have to say that I do recognize this thing from the Finnish culture, that we do start with a lot of, like with emphasizing the subject. And so what would it mean for us if we were to think about delivery more?
Well, I think both are still important. It's just the order in which you want. So you want to start with, what problem are you solving?
Yeah.
Why should they listen to you? What is your USP, your unique selling point? And that's true when you're making personal connections to a certain extent. You know, what's something unique about yourself you want the other person to know? But it's extremely true in a business context if you're selling. But then in that, you know, it is about combining those things. It's about combining, you know, smiling, being enthusiastic. I know we're going to talk about what we admire about great American speakers who are really good at rhetoric. And some of those lessons are around, you know, storytelling and their ability to integrate whatever they're saying into a story that keeps you hooked. And if you're doing a pitch, you should be thinking like that, building your pitch into a story and then making it feel very personal to the person you're talking to. What really great speakers do is, even if they're speaking to a room of 400 people or in a meeting with 30 other people, they will make you feel like they are speaking directly to you. And they will make you feel special. It's that Maya Angelou quote, you know, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you make them feel.
Yeah.
And so if you approach conversations where you want to make someone feel appreciated and you want to make them feel interested and you want to make them feel comfortable, that really changes it. And it also takes the focus off of you. You're not as nervous either on stage or in a meeting room, because it's not about you. It's about how the other people in the room feel and are taking in the information you're giving. And are you giving them the information they need right away first? Don't make them wait. Say it first, and then you can open things up in Q&A.
Wow, that's really interesting. But yeah, you mentioned those great speakers. So let's dive into that subject, because we mentioned in our webinar invitation, we mentioned Barack Obama and Brené Brown, who has recently visited Finland. So when you think about them, what can we learn from them? What makes those two great speakers?
Kaija, do you want to go first, or would you like me to?
Whatever.
Go ahead, because I did the last one, and then go ahead, and I'll add on to there.
Yeah. I think, well, both of them are representing something, but still they are humans. And if I take it to the corporate life or normal daily working life for people, what can they learn is that they should forget the organization. I think too often we are hiding behind our organization. This is the company that I'm representing. I'm not a human being kind of thing. So they are there as human beings, and that makes it interesting. They have a real content behind it, but still they are human beings. And one example of my own experience is John Chambers, who was the CEO of Cisco. I was in San Francisco 20, 30 years ago. And it was an international gathering. The whole stage was dark, and suddenly a light came, and he came in and he started speaking. And we were all like, what is this? Is this a show? Is this a theater? But he was incredible. And I've told this story over and over again, and I still think that he was amazing because he was bold. He did it another way. He put himself into play, and he was talking to me. We were like hundreds of people, but he was going behind in the audience and asking us questions and so on. So if you're bold enough and you are ready to put yourself into play, I don't mean that we Finns should be that way, because then it's like it doesn't work, but still there's a lot to pick up on.
Yeah,
in my mind.
maybe we don't need to go that far, but still we could learn something from it, like how to make it more personal, how to make it more engaging, how to like really focus on those feelings Alexandra was talking about. Yeah. So Alexandra, go ahead.
I think the example of John Chambers, and also Kaija, when I've seen you speak, you did this very well, is that, Obama, Brené Brown, you all make the communication feel personal. And I think that really sums up when you have the ability to make someone feel that you are speaking directly to them. And you do that by creating an emotional connection, either through tone, eye contact, language choices. And if you're speaking in front of an audience, I really recommend looking your audience in the eye. And that is finding people in the audience that for a brief second you look in the eye. It's very tempting the entire time to look, at the very back row. And like I'm picturing an audience in front of me, but to look at the very back row or to look towards the light so you don't have to see people's faces. But it really does make a difference when you look your audience in the eye. And in some places you can't do that, but you can kind of picture where their eyes are and give that a shot. I'll also say with President Obama, with Brené Brown, their use of voice is very deliberate. They modulate their tone, their pace, their volume, and that keeps the audience engaged. So when they're talking about something really serious, something you really have to listen for, they will drop their voice, they'll slow it down, they'll wait, and then they'll deliver their point. And they do that very deliberately because that is part of the kind of storytelling, speeding up your pace or slowing it down, that can make speeches more impactful. And that's what they're looking to have maximum impact. You can still communicate without doing all of that. Your message will still be heard, but whether or not you will have an impact, whether or not, someone like Kaija will be talking about you on a webinar years later will really depend on the impact you create with those choices that you can make. And I'll also note, those two examples that Sala's chosen to use, they both speak with a strong sense of purpose. So whether it's President Obama delivering a political message or Brené Brown talking about vulnerability, they really know why they're speaking and what exactly the takeaway is. They build the rest of the speech behind what should you remember from this. And so when you are practicing or thinking about what you're going to say, you should start always from what is it that I want the audience to remember? What are those three things that the audience should remember? And then I'll build the thing around it. And that's where the storytelling comes in. That's where things like metaphors, analogies, vivid examples that make complex topics easier to understand matter. And if you have a very technical or factual presentation and you start with that, then if you can layer that with metaphors and analogies and storytelling to better explain what your purpose is, what you're trying to do, then you'll have a home run. And with that, I'll sort of lastly add on, you'll also notice Brené Brown and Obama do a lot with body language. They use gestures to emphasize their main point. They'll stick their finger in the air. And what that does is it maintains a physical connection with an audience that you're speaking to. Brené Brown, she moves around the stage a lot and makes very purposeful eye contact, like we were talking about earlier, and that can almost make it feel intimate. I saw her speak at Nordic Business Forum a few years ago, and she made me cry. Like I was sitting in the audience and it was so emotional to be there. And I don't necessarily want to cry in every meeting I'm in or every presentation, but that was the reaction she wanted. She wanted everyone to have an emotional moment because her job is to talk about vulnerability. And it's very hard to absorb what she's saying if you're not feeling a little vulnerable. So it was a masterclass in how you deliver and how you can impact people's emotions. And if you extrapolate that and think about, I need to sell a product and I need someone to get really excited about it, or I need to convince someone that we should do a project, or that maybe a policy change needs to happen. If you can make them feel that personal impact and as excited about it as you are, then they'll be thinking about that for days. And ultimately in business, that's what we want. We want people thinking about us for days after we've met them.
That's some goal, like really people to remember us and think about what we said. Kaija, what could we use in Finland from this, what Alexandra just described?
Yes, we could use a lot. And what I see daily is that there's some kind of shame in public speaking. People don't rehearse. They don't do well in their presentations. They just gather the slides and they think that the content speaks for itself. They don't put them, and this is a stereotype. There are some people that do a really good job, but we Finns, we professionals, I think we need to improve in practicing, in rehearsing, in putting our narrative, our storytelling, everything into the good package. And I think that's what's missing. When I train people and I ask them to make a presentation that they give out usually, or something that is coming up, they come and present it and they are saying, well, sorry, I didn't have time. And I'm thinking, you didn't have time for the most important thing, that if you're having a public speaking, you're pitching something, you're pitching your product or your company or whatever you're selling or trying to influence, and you don't put enough effort on that. So what do you do daily in your work? Is my question, if I kind of really push it to the end, but still we need to rehearse. And there's one example that I always say and tell is Stephen Elop, who used to be the Nokia CEO. I know he was practicing a lot. Every time he had a town hall internal meeting for employees or whoever, he was rehearsing in his room, and somebody was walking on the corridor. He was like, come here, give me feedback. This is what I'm going to say. And people were like, wow. And he also told the other members of the directors that you should rehearse because it's important. And they said, we don't need to. Finns and Finnish engineers know it all. The product speaks for itself. And also this is a stereotype, but an exaggeration, but still rehearsing and training is important. Brené Brown and Barack Obama, they seem like very at ease and it's easy. It's because they are practicing. This is the work that they put a lot of effort in being so impactful.
Wow. Actually, I have to admit that I rehearsed last night a little bit and with an innovative way. Of course, I would have had my husband at home, but I don't think he would have been like very enthusiastic to practice with me. But hey, I had ChatGPT, who has now advanced voice mode, so I can actually like talk like I would to a person. So I practiced with ChatGPT. I was talking aloud and asking for feedback, and that really helped me. Even though it wasn't a real person, but still it helped me to feel more comfortable about this.
Yeah. And so if I may add, is that usually we say that, yeah, American speakers are great, they are really entertaining, but we cannot use it here because it's not the culture. And I totally agree that you shouldn't copy, you shouldn't try to be Brené Brown. You should be yourself. Yeah. But there's still something that you can take for yourself, not copying, but taking some tips and examples. Also, I was training Asian people to give public speaking, and they said they are admiring the Westerners. They are so fluent, they are so easy at presenting and smiling. But if it's a local presenter talking to a local audience, the face has to be calm. There are no gestures allowed because otherwise it's not credible. So we should take the cultural context into account in who the audience is the key.
I think building on that, I think it's not one or the other, right? So I think today we're trying to find inspiration and ideas for improving our communication and our public speaking as well. And I think Finnish professionals can improve their engagement by focusing on connection rather than just delivering information. So you don't need to do it the way the Americans do. You don't need to do it the way I do, but you can look at different ways and experiment with different ways of finding connection, because it is difficult in the beginning. As we said, it's progress, not perfection. Things are hard before they're easy. And one of the ways that I think a lot of good Finnish speakers do this well is by warming up in the audience. In Finland, we tend to skip straight to the content, but adding some engagement with your audience, asking simple questions, can make the audience more receptive. Or perhaps starting your talk with sharing something personal that's related to your topic could humanize you. It builds rapport. And you can also even ask questions of your audience. You don't have to have them answer verbally. You can have, show of hands, like who here in the last 6 months has done this, has been on vacation, or whatever the question you're asking that should ultimately tie to your presentation. In the US, asking questions and engaging the audience is a key part of the communication culture there. And when you invite responses in some way, like show of hands or clap if you, then you create this more interactive atmosphere, and it makes people feel more engaged or involved. And the other thing that a lot of American audiences do well that you could experiment with in Finnish is potentially even using humor as a tool. I find it's perhaps it's utilized quite a lot in American communication, perhaps underutilized in Finnish business settings. I understand in Finland it can sometimes be more reserved with humor, but especially on stage, a well-placed joke or a light comment, light-hearted comment still has the same effect on an audience. And I'll also say I would love to see in Finland a focus on solving the problem in the beginning. As we mentioned, for Americans, you want the key takeaways at the very top. You want the USP in the very top. And you could do that by posing questions of kind of trying to merge these ideas by, for example, how could I help you improve your process? Or is there a way to collaborate to solve this challenge? This is what we can offer. What do you think? And then you can still fit in we've done this for 20 years and we have this much experience. And, here is how we would solve it. What do you think? So there are various ways to incorporate those ideas into the Finnish cultural context.
Thank you, Alexandra. A lot to think about. And I have to say that we have a comment from the audience. There's a person who is working for a US company, but usually talking mostly to Finnish and Nordic audiences. And he finds this really helpful, and he has already found points he can utilize at work. So
fantastic.
Great job,
Good.
Kaija and Alexandra. Kaija, we are just about to move to audience questions, but I have a final question for you, a couple of questions actually. Kaija, what do you think about all this from Finnish business life's point of view?
About the American...
what Alexandra just said.
I think there's more to absorb from the Western style than we think. We can be more influential. And what I've seen is that Finnish people are quite creative. They say, well, I can never do that. Or maybe actually I could do that. And when I see them improve the progress, it's really rewarding. And they themselves find them like really enthusiastic. Well, wow, it's like going step by step. And I think it's really good. And not to be ashamed of rehearsing and speaking to your own colleagues in advance if you're having a big presentation. I
Or
think it's a good.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I was having a presentation for my own university students where I studied 30 years ago, and I thought I had a brilliant presentation. Then somebody said, maybe Kaija, you should show it to our younger colleagues here in Kaiku. And I was presenting and they were looking at me.
Oh, I remember.
I
that
had the wrong language. I spoke about the old times. They didn't understand what I was saying. So the whole presentation, I had to update it to this time of life. And when I did it, I was so glad I did it because it was good and the students thought it was good. So we need to be humble and we need to appreciate the audience more than we do. We think that the company logo in our slides is the key and the content is the key, but maybe we need to bring more of ourselves into play. So that's like the one point. And then the other point that I think is that there's no Brené Brown or Barack Obama one way to do it. It's your own personal way of doing it. And it's so fruitful to see that there are so many personalities, so many different ways of presenting, and they're all good. They are all brilliant, as long as the person is authentic and is like really enthusiastic about the topic and about the thing that he's giving a presentation on, the subject that he's so interested in.
So it's really also about finding your personal strength, like what is in your personality, the same thing that makes Brené Brown. So you can find your own thing.
But Kaija mentioned slides, and I feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't address what is now perhaps the elephant in the room, which is slides when you're presenting. I think when people hear this, they say, what I'm about to say, they say, I've heard this before, but somehow it doesn't get actioned on. Slides are not meant to be read unless it's sort of a briefing where the point is the slides. If you are giving a presentation on anything, the slides are meant to be visual representations of what you're saying. So the slides should max be a graph, a heading, a picture. You shouldn't at any point kind of need to look at the slides to know what you're talking about. Having index cards in front of you, like little note cards with bullet points on it on where you're going next in your talk, that's fine. Then you just quickly look down and look back at the audience. But if you're standing and looking at the presentation instead of your audience and reading from it, now we're supposed to talk about this, you haven't rehearsed enough. You haven't thought about what you're going to say enough. And again, it's not about memorizing. You can have small note cards that you glance down and you go, here I am, or I lost my train of thought, or I did want to bring this example up. But you don't want to be the person standing like this, and you don't want to have tons and tons of text. I think there are many areas in which communication styles have evolved in international business in Finland. I've been working in international business in Finland for almost 20 years, and the difference is palpable. You know, the internet, the growth and the change of the way we do things is palpable. But one area that writ large, and again, stereotyping, I'm still sitting in too many presentations in Finnish language and in English where the PowerPoint is the star of the show, and not the speaker and not the content. You do not need to put where you were founded on a PowerPoint. You do not need to put how big your company is on a PowerPoint. You do not need to put what your company does on a PowerPoint. That should come verbally from you. And then you could have an impactful image or maybe a quote on a PowerPoint, depending on what you're doing. But that, I feel like I would be doing you all a disservice if I did not mention that is one of those very practical things you could change immediately if you are committing this American communication sin. And also just with regards to Finnish language is very staccato. It's very monotone in nature, and that is perfectly appropriate with the Finnish language. But in English, being monotone is a trap. And the difficult part here, I think, for Finns to occasionally overcome when you're looking at cross-cultural communication is that Finns associate being monotone with professionalism. While in other cultures, especially American culture, but I think Anglo-Saxon culture writ large, it's seen as a lack of passion or interest, either in them, the person you're speaking to or the audience you're speaking to, or in your subject. So I think when Kaija says practice, it's also okay to practice varying your tone, especially when you want to emphasize key points. Even a very small shift. I'm not talking about going up and down and, but a very small shift will help keep audiences alert and engaged. So I just wanted to make sure to mention these things.
Great idea.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you. And I think we can all now agree that from now on, PowerPoint won't be the start of the show. That was a really great reminder. Thank you. Hey, I'm looking at our time, and I think now it's time for our audience questions. So please go ahead and ask your questions. And actually, I have somebody, because in the beginning, when I asked people what they expected from this webinar, one person mentioned that they would like to understand like how to grow from good speaker to great speaker. How do you two feel about that? If we feel that, okay, we can do this, we are good, what can make us great? How to build our path into being great?
What a great question. And I think the fact that you asked that shows that you're already on this path, because going from good to great is really about being intentional. You want to get there, so you have to work for it. And as we mentioned, practice matters. I mentioned in the beginning that I encourage debriefs on my team. So I want to get feedback. And in Finland, there's very much a sense that you have to have permission to give feedback. People have to feel comfortable enough with you to give you feedback, and they have to have that permission. So please do go and give your colleagues or your friends permission. Or perhaps you want a listener in the audience, and it's not enough just to say, give me feedback. It should be, in this presentation, I'm really working on my body language. Can you tell me how did my body language make you feel when you were sitting in the audience? Or this presentation, I'm really focusing on making sure my tone is engaging. Do you think it came off as engaging, or did you feel that it was fake, or how did you react to it? And really being purposeful about the feedback you're getting, and then iteratively improving it and implementing it. I also think it's really important to watch other speakers. Watch and really write down what is it that you like about that style that you're trying to emulate, and get that. Find the way that you would want to make the thing you like into your own, and then get feedback about it. And then just do a lot of public speaking. If it's public speaking you want to get better at, really find ways, go to Toastmasters, offer to give talks at university lectures. The universities around here have lots of different guest lecturers that come in. And for a lot of professors, they're not always aware that you might be interested in speaking. And student audiences are great because they ask great questions. They can be brutal at times. You really learn a lot. I love speaking to students, especially. I was at the University of Helsinki yesterday at an alumni event speaking. And those kinds of events are really kind of building your rapport, making you feel more comfortable, because getting over that feeling of discomfort when you're about to speak, the more you do it, the shorter that time period gets. And it's really funny because there's a person on my team who really wants to improve their public speaking. And the thing that holds them back the most is this kind of feeling of adrenaline and nausea. Like, what have I done? Why did I agree to this? This is a terrible idea. I'm going to fail. Why am I doing this? And really making sure that you have an outlet for that feeling, and then you go on anyway. Courage is really about doing things that scares, something scares you and you do it anyway. And so just reminding yourself that, you are courageous and you can do hard things, so that when you get on the stage, you practice overcoming that discomfort. I am uncomfortable for the first 5 minutes. Any of you who have ever seen me on stage, like I feel sick to my stomach for the first 5 minutes I'm on stage, but no one can tell. No one can tell because you're enthusiastic. That feeling disappears, by the way. While you're on stage, you get comfortable, usually disappears after some warm up. It's not just the audience that needs to be warmed up. The speakers sometimes do too. And you as an audience member can help American speakers by nodding, smiling, and then asking questions at the end when they're asked for questions.
Thank you. And it's so like empowering to hear that from a great speaker like you, that you feel you feel that.
Yes, it's horrible.
Yeah. I have to say that I love the feeling when the discomfort starts melting away. Like I start a little bit nervous, I feel it, and then all of a sudden I realize that, hey, I'm enjoying this, that I don't feel that anymore. That's just the greatest feeling. Yeah. So Kaija, how would you address that question?
I think Alexandra pretty much nailed it all that I had in mind. So I think, but one thing is that if you want to grow from good to great is to say yes to everything. Just go out there. The other thing that Alexandra mentioned was the frightening feeling, the nervousness. And I think everybody who is enthusiastic about their topic and want to succeed are feeling bad in the beginning or nervous, and that's the energy that's pushing you forward, but you're still doing it. I think those are the things that came to my mind. The feedback is essential in developing your skills. I think giving and receiving feedback, I think it's good to give the colleagues nearby the permission to give feedback on all the interactions. How did I do? You're free to give me feedback anytime you want, because I want to be an exceptional on my public speaking skills or in the interaction moments or wherever. So it's like going forward and being brave.
Kaija, you train and coach people a lot. So when you have somebody who wants to become great or even good, what kind of exercises do you usually do to make that happen?
Yeah, they need to practice. Surprise.
Yeah.
They are rehearsing, and I usually it's the basic things that we start from are the PowerPoints. If you're already a good speaker, you've realized that it's not a thing about PowerPoints. You forget about the PowerPoints. They are helping you when you have the narrative. But usually people are quite energetic after they realize they don't need to present somebody else, or there's no kind of thing that makes you a great speaker. It's you who are already a good speaker, but you can be even better. And that gives a lot of energy to the people. Some people, I'm not trying to change them to another person or to another style. It's only to bring out the strengths that they already have. So some people have the strengths in their charisma. They are just like, wow, what did he or she do? The other ones are good in narrative. They create stories. Some people are more like logical. Some people are more pointing into action. And some are like really emotional. So it's just finding the own capabilities and the capacities and bring them out in the open. That's helping people.
Yeah.
It's sometimes uncomfortable to talk about, but your message is always better received if you're likable. So thinking about what you like about other people, what are traits that people that you like have in common? And then trying to embody those traits on stage is something that I find helps me. Like when I think about who I am on stage, and I very much have to, when I'm on stage, put on a bit of a mask. Like I'm not necessarily Alex, like the different versions of myself. I'm not mom Alexandra then. I'm not thinking about my kids at home. I'm not thinking about my hobbies. I'm projecting a version of myself that is authentic, but is also, I think, the things I take from people I like very much. And I think that helps sometimes as well, because it puts just enough distance between sort of the cognitive dissonance of what I'm actually doing and being vulnerable on stage and what I need to say puts just enough distance to make me feel comfortable and able to do it. And then after that nervousness disappears, then I really am myself. Then I sort of just relax into it. And you can, if you've seen me, Kaija might actually, as she's seen me speak several times, she might actually be able to tell that moment now where she's like, there comes Alexandra. There she's relaxed again. Like she used the beginning and then she relaxed. Oh, I see there are many questions.
Yeah, there are many questions.
Now,
so let's go ahead because we still have 8 minutes to go. So Nina asks us if you can give a good speech or presentation if you are not like 100% professional in that matter. Can it be successful? Yes, you can.
Yes, yes, you can.
Yes.
You can, and you don't need to do a disclaimer. I'm not the expert on this. The case is that you know more than the other people in the audience, and you are not required to be the world expert on anything. You are just required to essentially tell the truth. So you can't make up facts, but as long as you know what you need to say on something and you know those things to be truthful, you can go ahead and say it. And then if you get a difficult question, you can always say, I can't quite answer that question because I don't have the background, but your question makes me think of this, and I would like to share it with you. And you could share something then that you know about if you feel that you can't handle a question. And you can always say, that's a great question. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I'd love to follow up with you. Could you give me your contact details and I'll follow up? And then either you can look into it or you can recommend someone who knows more than you. Talk to this person, make an introduction. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Then we have an interesting one from Elias, who says that great insights. Thank you. And he says that in speech communication studies, they even use different words for these more negative terms like public speaking, anxiety, or discomfort. The most used is arousal, which acknowledges the fact that everyone will feel something, especially the physical side, but differently in challenging communication situations. Just a second, the question just disappeared because he had a question, but my screen is so small that, here we go. So the question is, do you think also the kind of self-reflection of the negative experiences and feelings is crucial to improve?
Yes, I think it's really important to know yourself, know when the anxiety starts, when it ends, what triggers it, when it eases down, and to self-reflect, but also share it maybe with someone so that you're kind of in terms with your own emotions and your feelings. So yes, it belongs to being vulnerable, being authentic, and giving the best of you to the audience. So share openly with the trusted ones.
And I think it's really important to debrief when you're feeling negative emotions. I mean, one of my formative speaking experiences, Kaija, I think actually you were in the audience. We were hosting General Breedlove, who's a former Secor for NATO, and I was hosting him. And in the audience, it was a select group. I had very high-ranking politicians in the audience from Finland. And this was one of my first events as CEO, and I was incredibly nervous. It was one of the first things I'd set up, and I was super nervous, and I had to introduce everyone, and I had to welcome everyone, and people didn't know who I was, and it was one of my first times speaking. And I could not introduce General Breedlove correctly. I swear, I tried. I mean, I was stumbling over because, when you introduce someone like that, they have many military titles. I'm trying to say the Supreme Allied Commander Europe of of NATO at the Allied Command Operations. I'm really struggling, and I 3-4 times tried I just kept messing it up. And you could see the audience getting cringier and cringier because there are other military officers in this audience. Everyone knows, like, I am tanking. And I had to take a deep breath and go, guys, I can't do this alone, because I remembered that the audience is always on your side. The audience wants you to do well. So I remembered the audience is on my side. And I said, guys, you know how to do this better than I do. Can you please help me introduce General Breedlove? And I had the whole audience say his whole title for me. And then I said, General Breedlove, the floor is yours. And everyone remembers that event as a fantastic event. They do not remember my snafu. I remember my snafu. I remember and think about how I should have repeated his title 3 to 4 times in my own, like right before. I should have practiced to say that. Now, my quick thinking meant that everyone in the audience got really excited and were able to get involved. I turned it around to an audience engagement. I showed vulnerability. Oh, thank you for the hearts, guys. I appreciate that. But I just want you guys to think about that. Even when you mess up on stage, you can save it, you can engage the audience, and then you can think about and acknowledge afterwards how you got yourself into that mess. And now, even if I am winging something, which I don't do often, but it does occasionally happen, I will always repeat people's titles over and over and over. And you will find me in a bathroom 5 minutes before an event, obsessively reading titles, because that was the impact and that event was what, 8-9 years ago. But that really had a strong impact on me. So addressing those negative experiences is crucial, and it will make you a better speaker. And it is okay to have a negative experience. It doesn't mean your path to being a great speaker is over.
Yeah.
Great example, Alexandra. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Very powerful. Hey, our time is almost up. We have 2 minutes left, and this has been like truly inspiring. I want to thank you both so much, and I want to thank our audience. You have been great as well. But Kaija,
Sanna, before we go, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
How do you feel now? How was your anxiety? How did you cope with your nervousness?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was feeling it. But when you guys started speaking about this, I have been really enjoying it. So it kind of like melted away. And I realized, of course, that in Finnish, I would be like more spontaneous, but still it didn't like stop me from doing this or like appreciating this moment we had together. So I'm one experience like richer now.
I think you did well. Alexandra, what do you think?
I completely agree. I think you should do more in English. I think you did really well. I'd be happy to have you moderate something for us.
Thank you very much. Okay, but yeah, just a quick comment from both of you. If you would like our audience to remember one thing from this, what would it be? Kaija, you go first.
I'm repeating myself. Be brave, practice.
Great. Alexandra?
I was just going to say be courageous. Be courageous in practice. But I think we can do hard things, progress, not perfection. So, take some of these lessons that we've talked about, look at what great speakers do, and take inspiration from that, and then go find those speaking opportunities. You guys can do this.
Yeah. Go find those speaking opportunities, be brave, and also remember that the PowerPoint is not the star of the show. Your audience is. So thank you very much for joining us, and see you next time for another Hyppytunti webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being so engaged.